And we're live. Okay, so this session is vulnerable priests, which are you guys, and vulnerable parishioners, all the people out there. So this is a combination of training on boundaries, as well as training on protecting vulnerable people. Always starting with Scripture, 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 1 and 2. Think of us this way, as servants of Christ and stewards of God's mysteries. Moreover, it is required of stewards that they be found trustworthy. So, what we're going to quickly go over today, we're going to talk about pastoral boundaries and why they're important, even if you're not necessarily in a traditional parish setting. We're going to talk a little bit about some limitations on pastoral caregiving when you're not a licensed mental health clinician, so you're not getting over your head. And then we're also going to talk about protecting children and vulnerable adults. So, boundaries are very important. They sort of rope off times or relationships with certain people for a specific purpose in a specific context. People are both vulnerable and valuable, and we want to make sure that they're safeguarded. We want to make sure that all of God's children are others. We want to clarify to others what our expectation and purpose is, and we want to safely negotiate these sort of power shifts that occur within these pastoral relationships. So as priests, there are a lot of things that you bring to the church. You have specialized training to carry out ministry tasks. You're also here to both preserve and transmit the teachings of the church. You have the authority to administer the sacraments. You have been affirmed to practice ministry within the standards and beliefs of our group. The church has identified and affirmed you as having specific spiritual gifts. You have the knowledge and ability to access resources that facilitate and enhance ministry that other people may not have. And then you also get this sort of role and status that affirms different kinds of work that you do. And it gives you a little bit of respect and access to the world at times, ideally. This is important because pastoral relationships are based on an expectation that you take these things to help people and not to hurt them. You want to help them connect with their spirituality, understand the good news of the gospel, and understand how God's grace affects the person. When we're sharing our spirituality, it's a very vulnerable thing, and that really needs to be respected. It goes back to the whole idea of safe space that we're talking about. So safe space isn't just like a physical context. Like I can't say this little box inside the pulpit is my safe space. It's not just tiny. Safe space is the ability to feel safe to share things you may not want other people to know. And also, there is not an equal power balance between the pastor and the parishioner. When you have power, you have more resources, so you have the ability to help people or hurt people. If you don't have power, then you're vulnerable. You can only receive either help or hurt. So, some guidelines for respecting the vulnerability that comes with being a parishioner. Always respect their dignity and privacy. Keep encouraging them to grow in their faith. What is said between you guys stays between you guys, so everything is absolutely confidential. If you are a parish priest, your job is to make Christ known. Your job is not to join the local congregation. That's when you wind up becoming Church of Rome. And you really don't want that. And it's important to note that when you're under stress, then you're at very high risk for trying to meet your needs within these forbidden contexts, and that really creates problems. Self-care is very important. It is much more than drinking a gallon of water a day and getting your 10,000 steps. We all have basic emotional needs: affection, conversation, recreation, companionship, honesty, financial support, childcare. These are things a lot of times that local congregations are providing to their members. The problem here is you really can't start to enmesh things and get those needs met within the congregation. You've got to go outside. That's part of the reason it's very hard to be a parish priest. because you can't always take advantage of the services that are available for those who you're serving. When you get wrapped up in your work and in a local church, you're there 60, 80 hours a week making less than minimum wage. You get isolated from your friends and family. That puts you under stress. You always have to take care of your body and mind. You have to continue to develop your own spirituality. You can't use the sermon prep that you're doing as an excuse for not otherwise reading the Bible or not otherwise praying. So always cultivate different spiritual disciplines. You talked about a lot of things this morning. A book that I mentioned, Sybil Macbeth wrote, not a good day for talking. Sybil Macbeth wrote a wonderful book called Praying in Color. And it's kind of like praying or it's kind of like drawing as a way to simultaneously pray. And it's a great stress relaxation technique as well. And if you think that you're starting to come apart, it's always a good idea to talk to your fellow clergy and get consultation, supervision, support that way. These are some rough social media guidelines largely stolen from the United Methodist Church. They're kind of strict on these. You may find that there are good reasons not to adhere to these for one reason or another. So one of the things they're very big on, you should not initiate a friend request on Facebook to your parishioners. But if someone sends a friend request to you, you should always accept it because it kind of sends the wrong message. It's not a bad idea to have separate profiles for your personal side and your clergy side. You can create privacy settings. If you're going to say something political, think twice about it and then probably even then don't post it. If you're having chats or video sharing with other people, save transcripts of them. If you're going to be communicating with children or youth, you may want to have a closed group so you can talk among them without them having to friend you. And if you're going to post pictures or videos of other people, just get their permission before you do that. Some guidelines on counseling, and this applies to people that are not trained as mental health clinicians. Counseling should really be focused on short-term spiritual guidance, providing pastoral care for very specific problems. It should really be short-term. The Episcopal Church, I think, says you really shouldn't see somebody for more than 3 or 4 sessions before you refer out. You should try to avoid depth work and getting at the root cause of the problem, but more, superficial caring, listening, providing support. Sessions shouldn't last more than 45 minutes each, with an exception maybe for premarital counseling. Don't ever think that you can't refer a problem out to somebody else because, especially now since counseling over Zoom is so prevalent, there always is somebody. And then if you're going to give spiritual direction, you should also be receiving it. To prevent sexual misconduct, be sure to set boundaries when meeting with parishioners. It may be helpful to have a policy of not meeting in a room that doesn't have windows or doors visible to the outside. Do not provide pastoral care beyond the scope of whatever training you have. It is quite likely that you may have attractions or erotic feelings to someone, and we'll come back to that, but just be aware of them and don't act on them. Don't have dual relationships. You can be someone's friend, and you can be someone's priest. You can't be both. It goes back to trying to provide afterlife care when you're also part of a family. Avoid sexual behavior or anything that can be construed as sexualized. Don't isolate yourself. Don't overwork. Try not to get burned out. You have to get together with family and friends. There are some red flags here that things are about to go really bad. If you're spending a lot of time talking about your own experiences when you're providing pastoral counseling, that's a problem. If you are making yourself available at all hours of the day or night, you're going to burn the candle not only at both ends but in the middle as well. If you're giving or receiving significant gifts, that's a problem. If you think a lot about future visits, either you're really looking forward to working with them again and that's all you can think about, or you're really dreading working with them terrified of it, that could be a problem. If you feel the need to meet at a remote, secluded, or private location, that's probably not good. If you're daydreaming about the person a lot, that's probably not good. And then if you feel the need to do any kind of physical contact other than, the kind of touching or hugging you would do with a friend or family. Erotic feelings can happen. That's perfectly normal. The thing is, don't act on it. And don't tell the other person how you feel. You keep it to yourself, and maybe you want to discuss it with another clergy person or a therapist you're seeing. Questions that you can ask yourself to really help drill down what's causing this. What can I learn about myself by focusing on why I'm attracted to this person? Am I lacking anything in my life that I fantasize that this person can provide for me? And why do I think I might be vulnerable to succumbing to these erotic feelings? Some very brief guidelines for child and youth protection. I'm taking about 4 hours worth of training and putting it on one slide. So obviously, don't beat the kids. No physical discipline, harsh language, degrading punishment, or hazing. Anybody that's working with children or teenagers should be screened for a history of sexual abuse. No tobacco, illegal drugs, or alcohol. Vaping is bad. Smoking is bad. 2 adults should be present with children and youth at all times. Don't give gifts. Don't compliment someone's body. It gives the wrong message. Try to avoid private interactions with children and youth. And avoid physical touching other than the things that are socially acceptable to do. Be sure to immediately report signs of abuse, neglect, or exploitation to child or adult protective services as necessary. It's their job to investigate, not yours. I don't want to say always. In most cases, referring out causes less problems than the person staying in the situation you're currently in. And from a legal standpoint, generally, the confidentiality of the confessional, the idea that this pastor-parishioner relationship is a very confidential thing, doesn't mean you cannot report abuse that's going on. That's that in a nutshell. These are 3 really, really good books if you're interested in reading more. Ethics and Pastoral Ministry was written for Catholic priests, more in a parish setting. Ethics and Spiritual Care was really written more for spiritual directors, but it also works well for pastors as well. And then Taking Care by Carrie During is a book on boundaries and power shifts in pastoral counseling. So these are all really great resources. Any questions? All right, that concludes boundaries and protection.
Thank you.
Thank you.